Have you ever wondered what it's like to own your own business? Be your own boss? Welcome to Season 7 of Business Mentorship, Keepin It Real, where we meet with corporate leaders who have taken the leap to business owner and join us as part of the shareyourstoriesonline series. Hello, I'm Trish Tonak, and today we're going to meet a small business owner, celebrate their great idea, and introduce you to the person behind the logo. We invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the show. Our guest joins us from Calumet, Michigan. Amanda Wais is a speaker, award-winning author, editor, and publisher who helps others write and publish their stories. Amanda will share her story on entrepreneurship and give us a look behind the scenes into how she helps others write their stories with impact. I'd like to welcome and introduce everyone to Amanda.
Thanks, Trish.
It's such a pleasure to have you with me today, Amanda, because, we keep hearing all of these buzzwords about impact, right, as entrepreneurs. So when you're helping an entrepreneur or a storyteller write their story, how do we ensure that it has impact with the reader?
Wow, that's a great question. So many people, when they find me, they have a story that's so deep. This story kind of their life that took them from one side of, oh, everything is fine, to kind of going through the burning pits and then coming out on the other side and being okay. And the impact of that is, now that they're on this other side, how can they show others to be okay? So we always ensure that they have that first, like they are to the point where they can breathe and say, this is my story. This is what happened to me. And in that part of the story, we make sure to pull out the pieces that connect with the reader. Because when you have someone who your reader is going to either going through it or has been through it, they want to be able to relate. If you just are over here saying, hey, I can tell you what to do and I have advice, they're not going to listen until you tell them about the time you were in the burning hot coals. So those are kind of the two aspects that I look at to make sure a reader is ready to write with impact. An author is ready to write with impact.
You know what? I think that probably is the reason. I'm interested to hear the reason behind your logo, because the Cheeky Scribe, you're actually telling cheeky stories, to be quite honest, right? You're telling stories about people who have been in the art of reinvention, whatever that looks like to them. Give our viewing and listening audience a little bit of an understanding as to how you came up with the name Cheeky Scribe and where you got this really cool logo from, which is actually over your shoulder there.
Yeah, thanks. That's a fun question. People comment all the time on it. And so the Cheeky Scribe came from, as I decided that I wanted to start this company to help other authors, I kept going into a more like spiritual realm. The Wise, Wise Ink is taken, Wise Publishing, all that's taken. And so how could I go spiritually? How could I go? And then I was like, you know what? I'm not just this airy fairy girl. I got spunk, and we like to make people laugh, and we like to really drive things home with no BS. And so the word cheeky came to mind, and the Cheeky Scribe just rolled off my tongue. Nobody already had it. And I live in the good old North Woods of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. And there's chipmunks all over. So I thought, man, a cute little chipmunk with his face full of nuts. And then that kind of a scribe feather behind it. And it seems to work. I love it every time I look at it. It had a great designer.
It's very eye-catching for sure. And I think, to your point, when you're marrying these cheeky stories that people are sharing, it's kind of nice that they start at one place they go, as you say, through a little bit of darkness, but they come out the other side so that people understand that we all have challenges, right? Each
Yeah.
and every one of us has challenges. I was reading an article the other day and it sort of said, if you've gone through life without a bump in the road, maybe you haven't really lived the life you were supposed to live, right? Because the white picket fence comes and goes, right?
The bump is coming.
Yeah, the bump is inevitable, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's really why we're never going to learn if there isn't a bump in the road, right?
Right.
Now, you
Right.
mentioned that you've been a publisher, had been a publisher for 10 years. Clearly, is that through the Cheeky Scribe, or is that in your previous job where you gained your skills, your experience, you were able to sort of hone in on the thing that you really loved most, and then you transitioned into entrepreneurship? How did that work?
Yeah, great question. So my first experience publishing my own book was in 2012. And to be honest, it was not a good experience at all. And when I was done, I was like, I'm going to publish my own books from now on. This I learned so much because I made so many mistakes and it ended up paying more
Sure.
money. I thought, you know what? Let me learn how to do this. So I learned everything. I learned formatting. I was already a great editor. I learned to outsource my proofreading. Made that mistake twice, not doing that. So outsourcing proofreading is something I always do. Never proofread your own book. That's a quick tip. And then, so I did that for my own books. And then when I started the Cheeky Scribe, I realized that other people want help from somebody they trust.
Right.
There's so many, and I don't mean to scare people, but there is so much scamming going on because authors feel desperate. Like I was when I started. And I just clung on to the first thing that accepted me, not knowing that most places are going to, of course, love to take your money. So I just created the Cheeky Scribe as a safe place, a supportive place, a place where you can get the answers to your questions before you even pay a dime. And in the community that I created. So it's a nice like flow of warming up to my clients and really getting them to know me and the mission behind the Cheeky Scribe, which that's it. Helping authors write with impact, publish with purpose and a plan, and then get their book beyond their wildest dreams to be the portal to their business. So,
Well, that's a really interesting phrase because, we've had lots of folks who have written books. I mean, I'm a two-time author myself. First time I indie published, second time I went through a traditional publisher.
nice.
And
Congrats.
I thank you. And I think part of that is we think that the book is going to be a huge revenue stream.
Mm,
And in my experience, it's really a vehicle for other
mm,
things. So you're a speaker.
mm-hmm,
Clearly, the topics that you speak of are on the books you've written,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
Is that one of the ways in which, so, we've got a viewing and listening audience. I'm sure people are, in their cars or on the road and they're shaking their head going, yeah, I would like
Yeah.
to write a book and have that as a revenue stream for sure.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more that goes into the planning process in order for that book to really take on a life of its own so that it is a revenue stream in your business. Is there a tip that you can share with those folks who are listening to us who think that, I always use this statistic, 80% of the North American population would like to write a book. 3% of us, right, pick up a
Mm-hmm,
pen or flip open the computer and actually start to write. And
mm-hmm,
then 1% of the 3% actually become best-selling authors. When you take a look at those numbers and you drill that down, there's really not a lot of authors who are bestsellers. And bestsellers is really, I think, that gives you the leg up to make that book a revenue stream.
mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
Yeah, best-selling and award-winning. Not everybody does the best-selling launch. And if you
Right.
don't, if you miss it, yes, you can try again and relaunch because it does give the book more credibility. But I help my authors win awards. Like if their book is when they write it with impact, right?
Right.
and then they have everything is professionally done, you have such a great chance of winning an award. So I like to help them find the right contests and enter them and get that little gold sticker on their book.
That's a really great tip because I
Mm,
think that people think the misnomer is that a award-winning author is in fact the same as a bestseller, but they're two totally separate things,
they're
right?
different.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So perhaps you can explain to us, you gave us a little tidbit there. Award-winning can happen through time,
Hmm.
and bestseller usually happens fresh out of the gate.
Hmm.
Is that really the defining is the time level? So, if you're launching your book and you want to be a bestseller, you've got how much time do you have to be a bestseller once you've launched?
So the best-selling status watches your spike out of the gate. You know, how many books are you selling in a very short amount of time to reach the top in your category? At least that's on Amazon. And then the other bigger ones like the New York Times, they're going to consider all of your books through Ingram and Barnes and Noble and all those things. And that's going to be a longer process. It's a little bit longer. I don't have exact times for you on
Right.
this right now, but so that's like kind of instant. That's with the launch. They want to see that spike. Did it get you into your top categories? If so, you get a bestseller status. And
Right.
then for a book award, you really, if you want, you could enter before your book comes out, like while it's in publishing, unless you have to physically mail it in. Some of them
Right.
make you mail it in, some want a PDF. It's kind of cool. Some charge you, some don't. There's all different, whatever they want to do to draw you in. But yeah, that takes as much time. I mean, I submitted a book last summer and I just found out this month that I won the American Fiction Awards for my I'm sorry, I was a finalist, one of five finalists in the American Fiction Awards for my sequel of my novel
Cool.
series. So that took a whole year. And
Right.
then I entered the International Impact Book Awards. That takes like 8 to 12, maybe 16 weeks for them to, because they award more often. So I guess it
Okay.
depends, you know, if it's an annual award and all that, how often they award. And
Sure.
so that varies as well.
For sure. You know what? It's a great marketing strategy, though, because you and I both know that whether you indie publish or whether you are going through a traditional publisher, most of the marketing is up to you because, you're usually an unknown author, and an unknown author really doesn't have a marketing budget from a
Hmm.
publisher. And if you're indie publishing, it's coming out of your own pocket. So
Hmm.
whatever it is that you choose to do to market your book is not only do you have to come up with the vehicles for marketing, but you have to come up with the revenue in order to
Hmm.
push that envelope, right? I love the fact that you're giving people options of
Hmm.
how to create impact with their story.
Thanks.
Because those two options actually, I would bet most authors don't even think of,
They don't.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
to be award winning, people think, well, I don't know how to do that. How do I do that? And I love the fact that one of the processes that you've included through the Cheeky Scribe is helping people find those opportunities to submit their books for awards and then let the chips fall where they may, right?
Hmm.
Is there a particular type of genre of book that you're most comfortable with, or is it everything from soup to nuts?
Yeah, over the years, even just with my own self, I really honed it down to, I call it, a lot of people will call it their memoir. I call it a nonfiction educational book with their soul story woven throughout. Because if you write a memoir, and I'll just say this quick, if you write a memoir, that's great, but really, how old are you? I wrote mine when I was in my 30s, and I'm not gonna lie, I wish I would have reframed it to what I'm doing now.
Right.
Because who writes a memoir in their 30s? A lot of people now, because it's so easy to do. But when you reframe it as nonfiction, educational, with your soul story woven throughout, now you're creating a framework for your readers to follow to get through what you got through. You know,
Right.
that's this piece over here with how your advice, how can I help you? And then your soul story is the messy middle of how you what you went through, you know, and
Right.
then how you got out. So then that here's the big thing that translates to your keynote speech, your course that you want to give, your conference. Those action steps translate to your future content that you can break down, break up, do so much with to give you more possibilities rather than just how do I sell more books? No,
Right.
where do you give your
Right.
next speech? Where to get your next interview? What's your next course? Create bigger streams of revenue with your book as a vehicle. Like you said, I call it the portal because I imagine it like you open up the book
Open
and
the door. Yeah.
these codes you can scan to get right to the author's website, get their free thing, find their services, join their workshop. That is what makes your book so powerful. Get your reader to take their next step before they close it. That is what you want.
You've got me thinking because one of the things I'm assuming if you've written, I love the way you framed it. You've got a story, a memoir that has your soul story. Doesn't that also open the door for you to write a sequel, perhaps? So,
Oh, yeah.
if you wrote your story, as you say, in your 30s or 40s, or maybe even in your 50s, when time has lapsed and you've gained more experience, now you can re-engage the reader with, here's where I am now. Here's what
Mhm.
happened as a result of that story.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people loved your story as the main reason they loved your book, they're definitely going to want to find out more. If
Right.
they love your content and they're like, I can't wait to see where you are 10 years more successful and now give me the next step in my elevation, then you can put both of those together and appease both audiences and take them to the
Sure.
next step, which is
Sure.
really cool also. But I
Yeah,
will
for
say
sure.
one other thing I did when I wrote my memoir in my 30s, I shake my head sometimes. It's an award-winning memoir. People love it. But I just am like, wow, why did I do that? I exposed so many people in my life, and now I can help other authors not do that. But when I wanted to tell more of my story, I then started writing a fiction series to let the people in my life off the hook. You know, I created characters who are kind of all me with my different situations and more diversity, which I love because I could create characters from around the world. And that's super fun for me to do. So I did it in that way. That's an option for people who want to keep the people they love out of the limelight. But then you could also structure it to where you're giving advice and a framework for teaching content as well at the end or at the end of each chapter.
Now, where do you get your inspiration? Because clearly there's a lot of creativity that's involved in writing a story. I mean, some people do a big storyboard, there's various different ways that people sort of map out what it is that they'd like to say. But where do you find your inspiration? I mean, you've given us a little tidbit of information there where you've got a fictional series. Clearly, that's more than one book. So,
Mm-hmm.
how do you tap into the creativity that keeps the adrenaline rush going so that you can continue to fuel those characters?
Oh, that is such a great question. So every time I write, especially if it's going to be fiction, I know we're switching gears a little bit. I will map out the characters. I have a course called Creating Memorable Characters for Fiction. Right? What do you need to know about those characters
Right.
until they start keeping you up at night? Here's the cool thing about fiction. When you know your characters so well, and you sit down to write, here's what I do. Here's how I do it. I'll just close my eyes and I'll be open and I'll set the scene and I'll say, okay, Al's in the garden. This is my in the dirt too. Al's in the garden, and then Pete's going to enter with his son. What's going to happen? Go. They know each other. They know themselves so well that when the gate squeaks open and in walks Pete pushing his son in a wheelchair, um, Al, when he sees them, he knows what he's thinking. I don't have to make up what he's thinking. It just
Oh,
comes out and it's just like my fingers have to catch up to everything that's happening. And by the time I get done, I'm like, oh, wow, where did that come from? I had no idea that was going to happen. That's why I love to write fiction because the
right.
characters drive it. When I write nonfiction, which more people do, my mission is so strong. And anyone who's writing a book, what is your mission? What do you want this to do for your life, for your readers? When that is strong, you sit down, be open, and you let all the stories, all the thoughts, all the words that have been swirling around in your mind for weeks, months, years, decades, you give them a safe place to land and you let them come out. It's not about forcing, it's about allowing your words to hit that page and let it be okay. Whatever comes out, you can't judge. So
That's
those
a
are the
really
two.
good point.
Yeah,
You
those are
know,
the two.
being non-judgmental about what you've written is another really important factor, right? Because I think to your
Absolutely.
point, when you said earlier, you know, you gave us a tip and you said, don't be your own proofreader.
Right.
Right. I mean, sometimes when we're proofreading what we've just read, we think, oh, no, no, I can't say that. Or, oh, no, no, that's not what should happen. And you end up changing the story, not necessarily because it was a natural evolution of the character or what you were trying to convey, but because when you actually read it and you started to proofread it, you criticized yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. And
Which
you
can,
miss things.
sure, it can lead to a whole other going down a whole other rabbit hole, right?
Yes.
Especially when it's nonfiction, because
Mm,
as you say, if it's a memoir and it's nonfiction, there's a lot of emotion that's involved in sharing the details of that story. And
absolutely.
you can get really bogged down in the self-criticism so that, you know, you can talk yourself out of writing the book even, you know, even when after you've started, right?
A lot of people do.
Right. Now, let's switch gears just a little bit. How do you market to your target audience? Because, you know, one of the things that we do as entrepreneurs is we try to make a connection with our potential audience.
Hmm.
And there's so much out there, there's so much available. We've got all of these amazing platforms. Is there a particular vehicle that you use that you find is most effective when trying to make a connection with a potential client?
Awesome question. I think with that question, it also depends a lot on the author themselves. Like, what are they most comfortable with? If they love being on podcasts, get on all the podcasts whose audience matches your audience
Right.
so that it's really aligned and the person's like, wow, I want to follow them too, you know?
Mhm.
And if you want to start your own podcast, like I'm really excited because I feel like what I'm about to do next is open the front door with my own podcast called The Sales Savvy Author,
Oh,
where we're talking,
congratulations.
thank you, we're talking about all this stuff. And to me, that's just going to help me reach a broader audience
Sure.
beyond. But otherwise, I love to show up at conferences, meet people directly, and not even necessarily talk about what I do, but most people at these conferences that I go to, they want to write a book. And so I
Right.
ask them about it.
Sure.
And for me, that's different because I help people write books. But if you have your own book and it's not about how to write a book, go where the people are and don't just try to sell your book, sell your mission. Just let them feel who you are. When people fall in love with who you are because and you know your mission, and then they find out you have a book, they'll be like, oh, can I get your book? Now you
Right.
have them in your ecosystem. When they click this, then they scan the back code,
Right.
to get to your website. Oh, thumbs up. So I guess whatever you're most comfortable with to start doing that, and then do the things that take you out of your comfort zone. Definitely anywhere you can get in front of people, awesome. But if you're not getting a little uncomfortable and a little uncomfortable, you're not really growing. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure. And
Okay.
so here's another thought. We'll use myself as an example.
Okay.
So my first book I launched almost 10 years ago, and it was kind of like a memoir. So it's called A Diary of Change, 12 Personal Tools. So I
Mm-hmm.
shared my experience. I did keep a journal, and I translated that journal into a book. And so each chapter has a tip, a health and wellness tool, and an exercise that you can do as you're transitioning through the process of reinvention.
Beautiful.
And now you and I've met, and I think, oh, geez, you know what? Amanda could probably help me, but she only works with new authors. She's only helping people write a book. Do you also help folks like myself with the marketing? So, I could come to you and say, okay, here's my PDF, Amanda. I know that I'm either going to do a sequel to this book, but I really need to now develop a revenue stream, even though I launched this book very many years ago. Do you also work with those authors to help pick up the pieces from a marketing standpoint and perhaps push it into a whole new place?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One thing I always recommend, and you hit this right on the head when you said this chapter talks about this, and then it has this action step. One thing I love when people do is take their chapters and translate it into a curriculum and start a video course. And not everyone is into those, but if you get it if you seamlessly transition it from your book, into your community, into wherever, and people want to go further with you, now they can take your video course on, your advice that you have in the diary. And it's such a kind of a seamless thing. And so I have a course on how to build your course from your book. So, and one thing I'll say with that, because I do this, is offer people, when you have a course already set up, when you're like, okay, my book does all these things, I'm going to have a video course, it can just sit there for as long as you want, but people can get into it right away, however you
Sure.
choose to set it up. Now, when someone comes to you and says, hey, Trish, can you help me with this? You can say, oh, sure, I offer that service, or you can take my affordable video course. Now you
Right.
give them A and B. It's not, are you interested? Would you like to buy? It's like, yeah, I can help you. Here's my premium one-on-one, and here's my video course, where you're also in a community of other people who are learning the same thing. And
Right.
to me, that always gets an answer. It gets A or B. It doesn't
Right.
get, maybe not right now. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so having that set up, whether it's really active or not, is such a great way to get a person in different financial places of their life to do that. Yeah, but that's one thing I like to do. To take it further beyond that, absolutely. I have a marketer director. She's amazing. She deals with most of that. I feel like she could field some of these questions better than me. But overall, what's your mission? Make everything you're doing, connect your services to that. At the Sales Savvy Author podcast, we work on scoring a client, not just more book sales, right? Because a client can bring you a chunk of money. You have to work your buns off to sell the same amount of books
Right.
to get that same revenue.
You know what I love? I love that you've opened people's minds to the thought process involved in writing. So, because it's a struggle to write. So once the book is finished and you're ready to publish, think outside the box. So you're using that book really as the platform and the foundation for the revenue stream that comes. It's not, as you say, just from selling either the physical book or the PDF book, or maybe even the audio book, but it's all of the other things that you build that are part of that book as the foundation. So that's a really brilliant and wonderful tip for our viewing and listening audience, because I really do think that sometimes we get stuck we're so close to it, we get stuck to what's happening and think it's all about the number of books we sell. but that's actually not where most of the revenue comes from, right?
No.
The revenue comes from the things that you build from the foundation of the book.
Yes.
And that's what I think is a really amazing tip to leave with our viewing and listening audience, especially those 3% who are in the process of flipping open that computer and starting to write the words that eventually will become the pages of something that they will be able to offer with impact in their community. So thank you very much for that. That's really a wonderful way of reframing the purpose of writing a book.
You're welcome.
So thank you for that. Now, one of the things that we do is we ask folks to share 3 words of advice in our guest blog. And I'd like you to wrap up our conversation today by sharing with our viewing and listening audience why your 3 words are so important to you and what you're doing in terms of your mission and vision with the Cheeky Scribe. And your words are, let it out.
Yes, let it out. Like I was talking about, getting your words onto the page, you have to let them out without judgment. You have to give them a safe space. And I was thinking about this morning, and one thing that came to me is a little more philosophical, but when we're little kids and something's not right, we just scream and we just shout about it and we just let it out. And sometimes whether somebody comes to save us or not, we feel better. We feel better already.
Yep.
And as we get older, we're told not to do that. And so we keep it all inside. And it builds and it builds and it builds. And we learn not to let it out. And when letting it out is so powerful, I just encourage people to let it out in the moment. Right then and there, no matter what it is. Your words, your owie, anything, let it out, and it turns into its own creative energy then.
Oh, that's really wonderful. I seriously, you and I could talk for hours. So we'll have to get a bunch of creative people together and we'll talk about the whole idea of creativity. But I'd really like to thank you for joining me today and giving us some insight, not only into how to bring our stories to life, but how to create a revenue stream based on the stories that we tell with impact. So thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Trish.
To our viewing and listening audience, I'd like to thank you for tuning in for this edition of Keeping It Real. And if I'd like to send my personal thanks to all of our sponsors and mentors for their ongoing support, and ask that you share and invite your friends and colleagues to subscribe to our show, Business Mentorship, Keeping It Real, found on YouTube and your favorite podcast channel. Amanda and I would like to thank you for joining us, and we look forward to meeting you next time when we meet another business owner and celebrate their great idea.